Louise here, your host of the Talking Trading podcast. I'm here with Creed Moor from money.net. This interview is going to also appear in the Miracles of the Interweb in a simultaneous way on talkingtrading.com and money.net with Creed's community education. So I'll hand it over to Creed and we can kick off with the interview.
Absolutely. Well, first things first, Miss Bedford, thank you for coming on with money.net here and allowing for both of our communities to come together and just learn from our experiences and the experiences that they have also all shared with us. It's been a wacky last couple days in all of the global markets, it seems. And I just want to go ahead and get right into it. It seems with all of this hysteria that is going on, so many people are building what we would call a cognitive bias that is influencing their mental game of trading and working in the markets. In your opinion, from your experience and the people you spoke to, what do you think are a couple ways that traders can mitigate all of this noise that's coming through and affecting their trading?
The noise is the problem at the moment, and the people who are not using a written trading plan are being buffeted by forces. And I want to actually take you through a bias that I have just coined the phrase of volatility bias. This is my new bias. I have a feeling, and I'm interested in your thoughts, Creed, no matter when it is, if you ask traders, wow, is that market volatile or what? What do you think their answer will be? Well, traders often say yes.
Well, most traders I've seen say yes, except for the ones that have had some experience, and they go, it is volatile overall, but it's also low volatility. So it depends on the trader, in my opinion, and especially for the market that they're in, be it the futures market, the equities markets, etc.
It is fascinating because you're right. Overall, the volatility, if you measure it objectively, has been coming down. But what we're finding is that there's a lot of group hysteria. There's some groupthink among traders. Traders are feeding into their own fear by saying the market is so volatile, the sky is falling in, it is so hard to trade, and that's why I can't make money. Now, if we look at this more closely, what we realize is that we need to actually break this down. We need to look at facts, we need to look at data, we need to make sure that we are not feeding in to that fight, flight, freeze neurological part of our brain. Because as soon as we tap into that part of our brain, we know that our objectivity, our decision making goes out the window. So relying on hard data, I think, is very important. Now, there is another bias that I'd like to draw your attention to, which I think this is hilarious, is information aversion. Now, this bias is particularly for people who are flying high and then they're checking their portfolio 5 times a day because isn't that exciting? They get that dopamine rush and that instant feedback, yes, you're a good boy or you're a good girl. It really feeds into our need for recognition. And the market, we know, is a very poor teacher. Information aversion can also happen on the flip side. When things are going poorly, that's when we put all of these portfolios under the bed because we don't want to look at those ones. They're not performing, so we'll just ignore them. And we'll look at this one over here because that trade I made money on, aren't I clever? Now, all of this smacks of ego. I think this is one of the areas that people are very much struggling with at the moment, either too much or too little, and that lack of objectivity. Have you seen that with your traders as well, Creed?
We have, and something that I think really spirals into this is the concept of self-awareness overall. And in hindsight, we're all billionaires within the market on that one. Something I've had from some of the traders that come to me for one-on-ones of this is, well, I know the difference. Why didn't I do that? And I think that really comes down to the id of the individual on, okay, we're in that high moment of going on to it. And it was a manager I was speaking with earlier today on this stated that, you know what, that's why machines work so well, is because they don't get they do not become angry. They do not become flustered. They just go. It's either very binary. It's either yes or it's either no. How do you
Mm.
feel about the self-awareness amongst traders? Do you think it's in the beginning a little bit lacking, or what are your thoughts overall on self-awareness within trading?
I like the saying, there are no old, bold traders, because as traders, we do have to go through an evolution. We have to remember in the beginning that we were terrified little rabbits jumping at our own shadows, but also maybe not even understanding the full risks of what we were doing. I remember some of my earlier trades, Creed, on the options market. Oh my goodness, what was I thinking? I had no idea about contingent liability. I didn't know how much the market could bite me. And as a result, I was quite happy in my little unicorn filled life with clouds and fairy floss and wonderful candy all around me. But in actual fact, I was just about to end up in deep water. So I do think there's a lot to be said for looking at your own evolution as a trader, looking at the evolution of traders around you. Now, based on what you have just mentioned there too, I might just bring in a neurological concept here where the limbic system is often the thing that people relate with in terms of the neurological basis of id. Now, the limbic system is your deep brain. It's the very center of your brain. And wrapped around that is the new brain. Now, the new brain has verbal facility. It can talk, it can think, it can have delayed gratification, it can think through things logically and with structure and create a strategic roadmap about we should do this, but not that. But that old brain, that central old brain, that's pre-verbal. That has no logical structure. That is instant reactions. Is that shadow over there a saber-toothed tiger that's going to pounce on me? Or is it just a blade of grass waving? Is there potentially a mango tree over there that I can go and get mangoes from? It is so primal. Now, that interaction between those two brains is the complete area that we need to work on as traders. We need to get both brains communicating with each other. We need to realize that we can have that instant reaction, that instant gut feel, but we need to also add structure to that gut feel by using a written trading plan, Creed.
And that's the aspect too when we come down to journaling within our trade. I find it interesting that I do know some large traders and they're able to not necessarily journal their trades out how we think of the traditional methods, but would it be fair to say from the experiences you've had and seen as well that we all mentally build a map of our trading? It's just some of us do not look at that map in the best way. And that's the two levels of the brain as well, working with each other in that fight or flight response. It's always been said to make a living in our profession, we're kind of a type A individual when it comes to things, but it's an interesting type A. I've known people that have been level 4 schools that have gone through, they were the star captains of their volleyball team, whatever on that aspect. And they know what to do, but they become angry within their trading. Have you seen this amongst any high profile traders that are in the HFT field or even just the self-directed field to where their emotions seep into it? Maybe because they sized up too much or sized down not enough. What are your thoughts on sizing and those emotions?
Yeah, there's a lot that you've put into quite a lengthy question. So I'll start with talking about those emotions in relation to journaling. I think that would be a great area. Now, one of the things I know you and I share, Creed, is a love of journaling. I think it's the cheapest therapy you're ever going to get. I do keep a trading diary as well as I call it a morning journal. So let's look at the differences between those two first. A trading diary is where you're analyzing your trades. You're trying to learn from that specific trade. And I'm answering two questions. What did I do well? And what would I do differently in that particular trade, trying to build up a composite story about the areas that depict particular weaknesses and strengths as a trader. So that's one aspect. But let's look at the morning journal. The morning journal, I think, is a direct source of accessing our subconscious. This is where I aim to just keep my pen moving. The amount of crud that comes out in terms of what is ending up on the paper. I have got morning journals going back to 1987. When I first learned about this concept, which is horrifying, but also good. So I think there's a lot to be said for nuance rather than novelty. So sometimes with my morning journals, I find myself working through a particular topic. My sister featured for about 3 years. And then it was fixed, and I didn't talk about her in my journal for years and years. I think that is fascinating. So I do encourage everybody to keep a morning journal, and remember to write the date on top of every page. That way in the future, you can look back 5 years ago, find today's date, but 5 years in the past, and look how far you have come. It is a beautiful essence of current self versus future self versus past self. And there's so much integration that can occur there from an emotional viewpoint. And Creed, do you journal?
I do journal. I journal amongst all of my businesses, my times. And actually, if I remember correct, I do actually have my little small pocket journal that stays even within my wallet, because we may be going through on things that allow us to go, you know what? I'm waiting in line. I'm doing this. Yes. And that's actually something I would say for people is always keeping a small little journal with you to go, wait a second. We typically leave what we need to at the desk, but it always creeps in just a little bit. And you go, okay, let me jot that down to expand on later. So I prefer physical journaling, but I do have to admit, there are some very wonderful digital journals out there. I'm just not exactly sure that they scratch the brain in the same way as a physical journal would. How do you feel about physical journaling versus digital journaling?
Firstly, I have never found anybody else who's kept a large journal and a small journal. I've just shown you mine. I always make mine absolutely beautiful. They have to be good, high quality paper and quite expensive hard-backed journals, because they're precious and I want them to be an object of beauty. I think sometimes we forget the importance of chasing aesthetics. And the person who is, of course, the master with this is Steve Ward in the UK. His Trader's Journal is absolutely magic, and having those prompts to get you started so that you can work out what to write, I think is brilliant. I was just talking to Steve just earlier in the week, actually, and we were talking about the merits of journaling. I do think there's a lot to be said for developing your own style, finding out things that do appeal and that drive you on, and also not judging what comes out onto the paper. We can be very self-critical. We are sometimes our own worst enemy. And if we're judging ourselves because of something we wrote, that will actually prevent us from continuing forward.
And that brings the aspect of it too. Many people start a journal, they start a trade, they start a career on things, but they forget the number one thing: discipline. Overall, within any profession, we must maintain discipline, at least in my opinion. In your experience over the years between your journaling and talking with people, working within the markets, what role does discipline and self-control play for you and the others in avoiding the temptation to either size up or take too much risk within the markets or within any business idea?
Discipline is the key. And just getting back to what you were saying earlier about how sometimes we're a little bit A-type-ish as being a trader, I think it's even deeper than that. I found that traders who decide to get good at golf all of a sudden have bought all of the golf equipment and they've got lessons coming out of their ears, and then they're tracking their progress. Oh my goodness, it's just a joy to behold. Somewhat scary for one's spouse, but still possible. Now, looking at discipline, I think that is a real key. One of the things with discipline is that there is some lovely research about this. I'd like to actually just perhaps cite some of the research for our listeners
Absolutely.
here, that would be great. Now, the first one I want to bring to your attention is a study in 2011. Now, this is by Harberger. Now, Harberger, he decided to have a look at proximity of risk. Now, what he did, and this sounds like my worst nightmare, is he got people who are arachnophobes who really disliked spiders. Nobody really loves them, surely, maybe there are a few, but people who were terrified of spiders, and they perhaps tortured these people with tarantulas. So they got a tarantula and they put this tarantula at a certain distance from this arachnophobe, and they said to the arachnophobe, how far away is the tarantula? Now, what they found out is that the people who were the arachnophobes with high levels of self-worth and high levels of self-awareness, they were the ones who perceived the threat as further away. The ones who had low self-awareness and low self-kindness, it's such a big area, that, isn't it? They were the ones that thought the threat was closer. Now, what are we going to do with this as traders? We need to have the ability to develop our own self-awareness and our own self-kindness, our psychological fitness, if you like, so that we can more closely assess risks. This is the key. We need to have that reality rather than thinking a risk is further away or closer. We need to actually be objective, and that is the way that we can do this, develop our own psychological fitness. And I've got one other study for you, Creed. I hope you like studies as much as I do.
I actually do. I do.
Good. That's great.
It gives us and I don't mean to sidetrack, but ladies and gentlemen, that actually is something to keep in mind. Is everything you go and look at does not necessarily have to be about trading. We can apply principles from so many other studies to what we are doing. But please, Ms. Bedford, continue.
One of the other studies that I really like is Wendy Wood, who is a habit formation researcher. Now, Wendy found that in times of pressure, we resort to those habits that we have formed earlier, whether they are good or bad. Now, I thought, before I read this research, I thought that every time people are under pressure, they'd turn to nicotine and alcohol and watching Netflix and eating chips. I thought that's what would happen. My hypothesis was completely wrong. Apparently, what we do when we're under pressure, we resort to habits that we have formed in the past, whether they be good or bad. Now, what can we do with this as a trader? What we need to do is be very careful to habit formation, our own habits in the right way with a purposeful direction. We need to work out the habits we want to cultivate and to harness that ability of autopilot, repetition with rewards, so that we can cement those habits down in the good times, so that when we are under trading pressure, we have got a good chance of resorting to those habits instead of bad habits. Now, Creed, I just want to ask, this is actually from research from Luke Mathers. He has food, move, snooze as being the major things that people tend to resort to when they're under pressure. Personally, I work my head off at the gym. When I'm under pressure at the gym, it's probably not a pretty sight, because there I am sweating away, trying to work out the bad juju. What do you tend to do when you're under pressure and you're resorting to an earlier habit? What sort of habits do you resort to?
I've noticed that. I've seen references to studies similar to this, and I had to ask myself, what are my bad habits? And I'll go on a keynote with that. This is actually a very key point of accountability, because you are acknowledging a darker part of yourself when it comes to this. And I actually noticed that with my bad habits, thankfully now I'm off it, is I would drink more coffee overall, and or tea or cider. And my thing is I would recess into myself, go to the back of my brain and try to figure out, what could have I done wrong? Did I know better? If I did know better, why did I still do this? And it took many years. And I'll actually go ahead and say this as well as just last week, actually, on this one. It's been a very long time since I've done this, but I broke one of my trading rules overall. Had a lot of things going on, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I went, you know what? My laptop's just right over there. I think I'm going to go trade the dollar yen on this one. Sized up too much, took a 40K loss in the middle of the night with a Samina trading, and went, you know what? That probably wasn't the smartest idea. So what I did the very next morning, I identified that, okay, I have had some stress from everything. I've broken my rule of trading while stressed. So I put myself on restriction overall, and I have restriction metrics that allow me to go, okay, I've thought about this. I was stressed out. I had to pull myself back. And again, as you asked on that, what do I do? Is I sit there and figure out, I know better. Why did I still do it? Why did my cemented bad habit still come through? And I've known many managers, I've known many traders that for decades, they'll do all right. They'll have little small things, but every now and then they go off tilt. What do you do?
Oh, look, I know Jeremy Newsom, who's another trader that's more hometown to you than me. He is from Nashville, and Jeremy and I have talked about these. Both of us actually have exercised until we've puked. So not pretty, but actually that is something that
It's a
both of
thing. You got to get it out. Yeah.
that's it. That's it. So that's been interesting. But also, I do think that the thing that we're aiming to do here is to find methods that we can use to mitigate the difficulties that we can face. So, what can we do in the future? Firstly, I think the thing is to become aware. Become aware of the things that you're doing while you're under pressure. Now, we can choose in the good times to focus on what could happen when we are under pressure. Now, there's a method called the pre-mortem, which is a brilliant method. I have used this. I don't know if you've heard of this one, Creed. Have you used a pre-mortem method?
I remember it, but I do believe I'm remembering it incorrectly. Would you go ahead and refresh my memory then?
Absolutely. So the pre-mortem is where, and this does sound negative, okay, so I'm just prefacing it with that because we can't always be that toxic positivity personality, can we? Sometimes we actually have to face when things are quite negative. Is what you do is you imagine yourself 1 year since that project has been completed. All right. So I'll give you perhaps a direct example in my own life. When I started out my podcast, talkingtrading.com.au, I got together with my business partner, Chris Tate, and with the previous host and with her man as well, Nigel. The four of us sat around a table and I said, imagine it's 1 year in the future and we have had an unmitigated disaster. Talking Trading failed. It was awful that we were at each other's throats. Our lovely friendship that we have with the four of us has just splintered and evaporated, and we all just hate each other's guts and we hate Talking Trading. Now, grab a pen and write down exactly why that occurred. All right, so what we're doing is we're visualizing a project failure and then we're backward scaffolding to work out why that occurred. Now then what we did, the four of us swapped pieces of paper and we worked out that we were all worried about the same things, and then we worked out an action plan. How can we address these specific issues? Here are the pain points that we can see, the areas of weakness, the chance that things could crash down around our ears. What can we do to create a structure around those? And as a result, Talking Trading is a huge success. It's one of my great passions. I adore my show, and I absolutely have such a firm friendship, not only with my business partner, but with the two other individuals as well. So that pre-mortem, I think, can be very good. And I've used this with traders as well. Picture somebody thinking that they'd like to go full-time. Now, we know that we don't have to be a full-time trader to hold our head up as a trader. Anybody can trade any time frame and still call themselves a trader, but some people feel if they're not a full-time trader, that's an identity threat. So they want to be a full-time trader. Good for them if that's what they want. Picture yourself 1 year in the future. Full-time trading has been a devastating, awful experience. Why? What were the weaknesses in you, in your system, in your support mechanism, in your macro, in your micro recovery? What were the specifics that led to that downfall? Write them down and let's work on it together. Now, that method is absolutely exceptional. Can you see yourself using that method in the future, Creed?
1,000%. And that's the thing, is you're identifying known unknowns that can occur. And that's something unique within traders, is we actually have many dynamics. We have known knowns, known unknowns, because volatility in the market. We know there's volatility, we just don't know how much. And then there is the unicorn, the unknown unknowns, i.e. a black swan event, for those that are familiar with that. Those are the three things that, when working with this type of method, are something you should keep in mind. And the method that my mentor actually showed me on that is something similar. And if you would like, I would share that with the community on this.
Absolutely. Give us what you've got, my friend. Yes.
This one is going to sound a little bit morbid overall, because he said, think of your trading history as your obituary. If someone was to read your trading history, what would you want it to say? Well, we all do not want to be known as the grumpy old guy or gal at the end of the corner that was always throwing rocks at kids and all of that. The same is true in your trading. If in 1 year or 5 years you were to pass and someone was to read your trading history as your eulogy, what would it say? In knowing that that is how it's going to come about, it would say, I did this, I did this, I did this. He did not do this, this, or this. So this gives you a set of guardrails to then build a thesis off of. And I've always said that that is the number one thing that any trader should always have, is a thesis. Louise, if I may ask, what is one of the primary structures of a thesis that you have built over the years?
That's a good one. I just want to get back to an earlier point that you made, because I love what your mentor suggested. When I presented for IFTA, the International Federation of Technical Analysts in Malaysia, the MC was this bouncy guy. Oh my gosh, he had so much energy, and he wore the most amazing 3-piece Armani suits. It was quite impressive. And he told me that in Malaysia, there's a saying, what if a child was watching? Now, that is a great leveler, isn't it? Because as an adult, we're supposed to provide that example for the children in our life, whether they're our children or perhaps even just that village community. Now, I do challenge my traders to say, what if another trader was watching? Would you behave in the same way if you knew somebody was taking notes about your own behavior? Now, it's a great way to get that separation between who you are and looking at yourself in a third party manner. Sometimes I've actually even been heard to utter, which is funny, when I was working in a communal office, Louise, stop doing what you're doing, and talking to myself in the third person. Luckily, research backs up that that is perfectly emotionally healthy. So for everybody that does that, that's okay. It's actually a good way to goad you into action and to get you to follow best practice. Now, in terms of a thesis, tell me more about that, Creed. Give me a bit more of an understanding about what you're asking here.
So the framework for a trade, as I've put together for many people, is we always want to know where we're going to get out, where we're going to get in, why we're going to get out, why we're going to get in, what we're willing to risk and allocate. And what I consider one of the most important things is, how long are we willing to lock up this capital? There's no reason that a day trade should become a swing trade, because we've broken our thesis overall. So I've always said those are the 5 to 6 things that someone should build as a trading framework for each action they're about to take into the market.
So I'm guessing my correlation there is a trading plan. So I consider a trading plan as a manifesto, if you will. This is how I live my life as a trader. Here's my entry, my exit, my position sizing. Here's what I do with windfall profits. This is what I do when I go on holidays. This is the accounting structure that I will use. And here is my disaster recovery plan, which tells me exactly what to do if I have a failure of the internet or my computer breaks down, or weirdly, if your computer mouse stops working. Often that is the thing that can drive people
It is.
crazy. Oh my goodness. And don't forget, computers crash. I had a couple of crashes in a row once. It was just like boom and then boom. And it's like, what are you talking about? Life, come on. So what are you going to do in all of those situations? Because as a trader, we must be a quintessential small business. We have to plan for everything in advance. We have to evaluate and measure how we will respond in the future. And we have to have something that guides us as soon as our heart rate increases, as soon as we have those interoceptive ideas that pop into our head that all we can hear is our own heart racing. So interoception is a wonderful area. Maybe we can talk about that in just a moment. But once we've got something written down, logical, clear, and structured, and we have a Bible, if you like, to refer to, that can guide a lot of our behavior. So in terms of a thesis, have a written trading plan template, have a way of evaluating risk in there, have checklists, and make sure that you can follow it when you're under trading pressure.
And that brings an amazing point forward when we think of the idea of looking inward with this. Is there a time you've looked back on your trading and with a lack of empathy, is self-forgiveness important when we've had a bad moment of this really was something I couldn't the mouse going out, the multiple crashes, myself just recently, my new laptop going through, getting ready to go through everything, BIOS update. No one plans for these things. So what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Look, I've got some controversial views on self-forgiveness, and I know that my psychological colleagues are going to be up in arms when I share this with you, Creed, but give me a little bit of leeway with what I'm about to share. I think people forgive themselves too quickly. They allow poor performance to become a habit as a result. I have got a trader. She basically lost her house before I got to know her because she kept on forgiving herself. She would make mistake after mistake. It was unbelievable. She showed me her previous diaries before I actually got to her and started working out, this is our problem. She made errors, and then she said to herself in her diary, that's okay, it's all right, it's fine. No, it's not fine. If you have made a mistake, you deserve to suffer. You deserve to analyze it. You deserve to sit in your own sewage for long enough so that it hurts. If it doesn't hurt, the odds are you're not going to make amends for the future trade. Now, we know with one trial learning that if there is a massive event, the odds are we're going to get the idea. For example, the kid with the hand on the hot plate. We know that kids touch ovens once, hopefully only once, and then they withdraw and they learn, they go, oh, that's what mum was saying, don't touch that hot thing. Okay, it gets embedded into your mind. My thought is with self-forgiveness, if traders do not allow that pain to guide their future actions, to say, I did this, it hurt, I won't do it again, they're destined to repeat the same cycles over and over again until they're completely broke. I would rather you have a small pain that you learn from so that you don't end up coming a cropper later. I don't know if that word translates actually, a cropper. It means, I think it's an English term. It means falling off a big cliff when you could have just jumped over a tiny little speed trap. Far better to learn from the speed trap so that you don't fall off the cliff.
I agree 1,000% with this. Now, Louise, a little bit of a deeper question on this aspect of it. What is the time frame you believe that somebody may need to give up the dream of trading? I've set a time frame for individual before that asked me, how long should I pursue to become a day trader? And they're asking for an out overall. So I typically say somewhere between 4 to 5 years. That way they have a long enough time to do things. And in my opinion, from everyone I've spoke to, if you do not have the risk management down by 4 to 5 years, you've probably lost enough money to just go, this is not for me. Now, what are your thoughts on that?
You're quite brave at answering that with a specific. I don't think I have answered that with a specific. What I aim to do is I scaffold into the trading plan with an if then statement. Now, we know this comes from the weight loss industry, which is quite fascinating to see because they have got so much data so that we can actually pull some of that data and use it for our own purposes as traders and still be science evidence backed. Now, if the evil donut bringer brings donuts into the office, then what is your action? Now, if you've premeditated that, then you can make eye contact with that evil donut bringer and say, thank you, but I don't feel like one today. You might have to lie, you might have to rehearse it 500 times, but you can actually stop that behavior from going into your hips and your waistline. So, how do we apply this for trading? If then statements. If I have lost 25% or more of my trading equity, then I will stop entering new positions and I will seek a higher trading authority. Now, I feel very honoured to be many people's higher trading authority, and I'll bet that you are on some people's list as well, Creed, as being the person when all hell breaks loose, that person needs to come to somebody, and I bet you're written down in people's trading plans. So I don't say a particular time. Personally, for me, and I mean, I'm being extraordinarily vulnerable with you here, but it took me 3 years to break even in the markets. It took me 5 years to really get my head around what was happening. Some of the traders that I've met, some of them have taken 10 years to actually work this out. Look at Mark Cook from the Market Wizards books. Mark Cook took 10 years to actually feel like, hey, I think I can do this. Think I can do this, in inverted commas. Didn't know, thinks. So I am wary about providing specific answers around a question that could have many, many, many data points.
And that's an interesting way to approach it. And that's what I love about the trading community, because what makes a market? Multiple ideas coming through. And I agree. We've seen people that it does take a little bit longer. And I will not say that I was the fastest learner in class to begin with a lot of other subjects. But when it comes to the market itself on this, and this is my final question for you, because I think this is something you're one of the few people that could really answer a good part about this. Colors versus numbers. At the end of the day, we're all seeing the same chart. I've always said it's how we choose to receive, perceive, and act upon the information being provided to us. What are your thoughts on that as we see so many people just say, I need one more indicator pack, or maybe I need to change this color? What are your thoughts on perception of the chart in front of us?
There is a lot to be said for becoming too complicated with this, developing too many indicators, burying that share price action and the volume with so many indicators that you can't see it. I have seen some charts from hell that look like that. How do you actually interpret it? I do think we have to guard against that. And why are we doing this? As traders, we're doing this because we think that gives us a semblance of control. Now, in actual fact, we are not in any way controlling what that share will do, what that position will do. We, through all of our barracking for it, I barrack for my shares. I say, come on, baby, jump over resistance. You can do it. Take a deep breath and leap. But it can't hear me. We know that. It can't hear me. So everything that we're doing is trying to build comfort. We are pleasure seeking, comfort seeking, and risk and pain avoidance creatures at our hearts. Be careful about deluging your trading plan with complexity. Do not deluge the chart with complexity. In essence, the majority of what exceptional traders do is very simple, and they do it again and again and again. I've been trading since 1990. I had no idea that my life would look the way it was when I started. I think you can grow into this position, and if you give yourself time to grow and follow good education like on money.net and talkingtrading.com.au, you've got an exceptional chance of learning from your own behaviors, but also working out who you are as a person and as a trader.
I love it. I believe today's conversation has been amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, I've always said that these conversations are much like a book. Watch once for enjoyment, the second time to gather questions, and the third time to really dig out the answers to those questions. With that being said, Louise, thank you for dropping some great knowledge today and really helping people expand on who they are as a trader. If people want to find out more about what you and the team have going on, how can they get a hold of you?
Definitely come over to my podcast, talkingtrading.com.au. But if you're the type of person who wants more, if you want to work on your own trading and develop your own trading plan, which I recommend everybody does, come to my website, tradinggame.com.au. At tradinggame.com.au, I will give you my free trading plan template covering so many of the areas you need to do in terms of becoming an exceptional trader. You know, I think so many people just give this a bit of a dabble. They think of themselves as having an interesting hobby, but really that is not your audience, Creed. If you are the type of person listening that wants to develop an exceptional trading plan, you owe it to yourself to come to tradinggame.com.au and download my free trading plan template. And Creed, where can my traders learn more about you?
Well, everyone can come over to money.net. And with that being said, you can come to your account, sign up for that, and come into the Scout Pit, talk with the community, and ask questions of all of the professionals from around the world that are willing to give you some insight throughout the week and the day on your trading. We're a community of individuals that want to help each other out. And with trading itself, especially for independent traders, being kind of a lonely game, this is the one thing that you can come to and talk with like-minded people to help develop yourself. Money.net is the best place to find me and to find all of the professionals that are working through the markets every single day.
We are Louise Bedford and Creed Moor, and happy trading from both of us.
As always, remember, your trades are in the history. We'll see you around. Stay green.